Welcome to today's webcast series presentation, Hazard Pay, How to Protect Profits from the Digital Data Explosion. My name is Bob Drake, editor of Civil and Structural Engineer magazine, published by Zweig Group. Thank you for joining this webcast, which is sponsored by Nuforma. Before we begin today's presentation, first some general information about the webcast and the GoToWebcast platform. The views of the speakers and organizations participating in this webcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Civil and Structural Engineer or its publisher, Zweig Group. If you have any technical difficulties while viewing this webcast, please submit questions or a brief explanation of your technical problem using the Ask a Question box on the left side of the webcast dashboard, and a representative will assist you. Note the button in the upper right corner to enlarge the slide viewing window if desired. During the webcast, you also can submit questions to our speakers using the same Ask a Question box. Submit your questions at any time, and we will try to answer as many as we can later in the webcast. It will also be helpful if you can include the name of the speaker who you are addressing your question to. Zweig Group encourages group learning for our events. If you are viewing the live webcast with a group on one registered person's computer, that person must complete and submit the multiple viewer registration form for the group in order for everyone to earn credit. You can download the multiple viewer registration form from the Event Resources section on the left side of the webcast dashboard. Submission instructions are on the form. Also note a link in the Event Resources section to download a PDF of the slides in today's webcast. Details on downloading a certificate of completion will be provided later in the webcast. Viewers of archived webcasts must pass a quiz in order to download a certificate of completion. Additionally, at the end of today's event, we will provide a webcast evaluation survey for you to submit your feedback. Tyler Ferguson, Director of Industry Solutions Engineering with Nuforma, will be moderating today's discussion. So let's get started. Tyler, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, in particular our two panelists, Tom and Jason. Before we get started, gentlemen, if you'd take a moment to introduce yourselves to our guests.
All right, thank you, Tyler. This is Tom Davis. I'm Vice President and Area Manager with Littlejohn. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of S&ME. Littlejohn is a 28-year-old civil planning, landscape architecture, and survey firm. We operate from offices throughout the Southeast. We're currently licensed in 42 states. We do all things site-related. Healthcare projects and military housing projects and lodging take us nationwide. So kind of gives you a little bit of a context from where I'll be talking from today. A couple of years ago, we became part of S&ME. S&ME is a 40-year-old traditional geotechnical, environmental, and construction materials testing firm. We have about 1,200 employees, and so now that Littlejohn is part of S&ME, we offer site-related services from due diligence to design through construction. So that's me.
Thank you, Tom. Jason?
Thank you, Tyler. Good afternoon. I'm Jason Brooks. I'm President and CEO of LDA Engineering. We are a regional firm serving primarily Tennessee in Kentucky, Georgia, and Alabama. We're about 45 people based in Alcoa, Tennessee. We are a second-generation engineering firm with our founder, Lamar Dunn, starting the firm in 1982. We focus primarily on serving municipal clients in the water, wastewater, gas, electric utility space, but we also do a lot of infrastructure projects for private clients as well, including industrial, commercial, and residential development. So we're a full-service civil and environmental engineering firm.
Thank you, Jason. So the three of us know each other a little bit. We had an opportunity to meet at an ASCE event this fall in Nashville. But for our guests on the web who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Tyler Ferguson. I'm an Industry Solution Director at Newforma. What that means is I try to help direct our efforts in a way that aligns with the needs of the industries we serve. I have a civil engineering degree from Ohio State University. I started my career as a project engineer at a commercial construction company out of Columbus, Ohio called Cornica Cosing. From there, I transitioned in the software industry, where I primarily worked with site civil designers, diagnosing workflow issues and making software recommendations. And since then, I've come on board with Newforma, and I've had the opportunity to diversify a little bit and work across all disciplines of engineering. Now, a big part of my job is to get out and talk to people in the industry so I can understand workflows and the problems that are impacting your businesses. In an effort to better understand the ever-changing needs of the industry we serve, we hit the road this fall on an 8-city tour throughout North America. I moderated panel discussions in major cities across the U.S. and Canada, where I asked engineering leaders to talk about how data and evolving tech is impacting their businesses. One of the things that stood out to me as we spoke to more people was that people feel like their inability to manage the enormous amounts of data on modern projects is leaving them at risk. Since the topic of risk kept coming up in every city, I began to ask people specific questions about their experiences. It turned out that about 90% of our guests and panelists, that's several hundred engineering company leaders, had been involved in discovery and felt unprepared to tackle it moving forward. So we thought it would be interesting to talk to a few more engineering leaders about their thoughts on risk and how they handle it at their firms. So Jason, I'd like to start off with you. You and I have spoken a little bit about when you took over at LDA Engineering. You didn't feel quite as confident in your ability to protect yourself. Can you talk a little bit about how workflow has evolved at your firm and how that's impacted your confidence and your ability to mitigate risk?
Sure. Tyler, I think just a little quick dip back in time to reflect on when our firm started back in 1982 with a very traditional founder and leader who started very small. Mr. Dunn was it was pretty much limited to himself, a CAD tech, and one administrative assistant. And so as his effort began to become successful, workflows and back office support kind of grew organically. And, of course, in that time period, there wasn't as much availability as we have today with regards to computer technology and computer software systems and even things just as simple as we all consider it today, the ability to email correspond with clients and other people working on a project. Fast forward to 2011 when I joined the firm, certainly Mr. Dunn had introduced AutoCAD, email, all the office support tools that come on our computers today into an organization that had kind of been founded around a very basic set of tools that included hand design and hand calculations. And so we had a very, for it to be 2011, we had a very antiquated filing system. We had the room that maybe every firm has that's just full of project files with reams of letters and other correspondence along with stacks of drawings, all of which was difficult to sort through and find, and some was cataloged, some was not cataloged. And then when you pile on top of that the addition of just simply email and the amount of email correspondence that were sitting in various people's inboxes, some filed, some not filed, it certainly creates a moment of, gosh, if somebody needed to sort through this quickly and find something, that could be a problem. And so when you convert that into, as a business manager, what you're responsible for in terms of mitigating risk, really three types of risk quickly come to mind. One is your relationship with your clients. The ability to receive an inquiry from the client and the ability to respond to that, certainly in today's world that we live in, the expectations for responsiveness are minutes and often seconds. And it can come in multiple directions, as we all know. We still have correspondence via calls, but certainly email, text messages, etc. And so there's that exposure. And then all of us that have been through our risk management training with our insurance providers well know that those hanging out there emails certainly expose us to a lot of risk from a legal perspective or a lawsuit perspective or a claim perspective. And then finally, all of that kind of translates into financial risk, be it lost revenue because we've got an upset client, or we've got a claim or some lawsuit issue that's exposed from the inability to manage this vast amount of data. So certainly we all have come to believe and expect that technology has helped advance their business. There's no doubt. But with it comes that sometimes unintended consequence of a lot of data and unmanaged data or unmanaged information, if you will, creates some risk. Does that answer your question, Tyler?
Yes. So it sounds like you had a pretty substantial challenge ahead of you. You had some somewhat archaic data management systems in, a room full of banker boxes full of paper that you had to figure out how to incorporate into your business, and you had some of the newer additions of email and that sort of thing in the digital side. So you had to bring all that together. As you were bringing that system and building a process that you could use to feel more protected, when you were bringing that together, were there any situations or specific instances you remember where you had a dispute or an issue come up that you were unprepared to deal with?
Sure. I'll share actually a claim, a legal matter that we were involved in. One of the services that we provide is during the construction phase, we provide resident project representative services, or what some folks refer to as inspection services. And during the course of that activity, as well as during the survey period of this particular project, there was a personal injury that occurred on a property adjacent to where the project that we were providing services was occurring. During the design phase of that project, we had been asked to also provide survey services, and as part of that, we picked up some of the stormwater facilities on this adjacent property. Later, a storm grate actually fell into the bottom of a manhole, and someone fell into that manhole and was injured. And so, as everyone on the call that's been involved in a lawsuit knows, the discovery period starts, and it's basically a wide net request by the attorneys to gather all related information. And so certainly we're now facing the case of banker boxes, emails, all this information that we kind of have to piece together, answer questions that are going to come up during depositions and other parts of the trial, or the mediation, as the case turned out to be. And what we discovered was a lot of the antiquated traditional logging and journaling that occurs both during the pre-design phase, during surveying, as well as in the daily report phase. We were still, during that particular project, using paper systems. We had triplicate copies of daily reports from the inspectors. We had survey journals that were sometimes not as complete as what we would have liked to have seen them. And so it created space for the plaintiff's attorneys to create uncertainty in the case. And so it's just an example where incomplete data, unmanaged data, created risk that was that a lawsuit was able to take advantage of. And so what we've learned from that is to, through the use of our new forma system, we're able to tick and tie all that project information together using the workflows that are already designed in the system. And if we just execute what our system is designed to do, everything is placed where it needs to be, it's tied together. If there's an incomplete response to a question or a submittal or something that may expose an issue down the line as the project is completed, the system notifies us of that. So we're able to, without having to remember, hey, I've got this incomplete issue sitting in my journal that I need to close, I can move on. So that's a case for us, Tyler. I hope that helps answer your question.
Absolutely, and I can relate to the issue. I can remember my first job. I was actually an intern still. I was finishing up my civil engineering degree at the time, and we had an issue where we needed to go back and find some data for a project. And me being low man on the totem pole, me and a handful of other junior staff were sent out to a storage locker, and I was hunting through banker boxes, and we were, ripping open plastic bags, looking through documents, and we had sort of a similar setup where we had, paper that we needed to look for from a little bit of older projects, and then we had the more up-to-date things, and we had process in place. We had naming conventions. We were saving emails to project files. We shared everything or saved everything to a project folder. But when it came time to find things, even with our processes and our naming conventions, we were tracking RFIs and submittals through spreadsheets. It took an enormous amount of time to find things. And a lot of those man hours were charged to overhead job codes. So we were spending an enormous amount of time and an enormous amount of money in those situations. So, with new forma in place at your business now, would you say that you feel like you can deal with those sort of scenarios, not only find what you need, but find it without spending 4 months trying to collect all the data you need for a particular issue?
Yes. So the new forma system has certainly given us what we consider to be some real distinct advantages, both in terms of better managed data, but also more efficient use of the data across multi-disciplines and multiple phases of a project. So we're able to follow the workflows, doing things that we would normally do as engineers or other engineering professionals, working at our desk, working in the field, wherever our work takes us. As we follow those procedures, we're able to get data where it needs to be. For example, the case I was talking about earlier where we had these triplicate copied daily construction inspection reports, we now do that using a tablet, using the field component of new forma. So when our folks are out observing progress on a construction job, an issue can be captured, a picture can be taken, a question can be raised, and all of that, as soon as the RPR inputs that into a system on his tablet, it goes into our database in new forma, and if that question needs to be directed to an engineer, whether it's inside our firm or maybe a teaming partner, we can route that, and everything's being captured and recorded along the way. So the logging, the workflow, sort of this forced is probably a little strong, but certainly designed approach to managing project information we feel very strongly has mitigated risk for us in terms of legal lawsuit claims, thereby mitigating financial risk. But we really, maybe moreover, are pleased with the improvement it makes with our client relationships. Because again, going back to the point I made earlier about the expectation of responsiveness and being able to find things quickly and get a question answered for a client, or provide them the information they need to maybe answer a question to their client, is critical. And so we feel like we've at least got a system in place to do that. Still a long way to go with implementation because there is still a human factor. And so we're working today to keep people trained and keep them advancing their skills in this system.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up responsiveness, because on our 8-city road tour, our roundtable discussions, the commoditization of the engineering market came up quite a bit, and people felt as though responsiveness was something they could use to differentiate their firms. And if you're able to provide a better level of service to your customer while making sure that you're protected on your end, should you and your customer come to an inroads and are no longer friendly with one another, knowing that you have the information you need. And for me, when I was searching for things, it wasn't necessarily having it, it was even knowing where to look. So having a central hub seems to be something that you're benefiting from. I appreciate you sharing your story. Tom, I don't want you to get bored, so want to invite you in here to join in the conversation. I know with conversations that you and I have had in the past, that one of the challenges you face is that you are working on fragmented teams, and that's something that I hear more and more. A lot of companies aren't just working with developers and engineers and architects and contractors in their town or even their state. It's crossing city and state lines, and even working with design professionals in other countries quite often. So can you speak to the issues as it pertains to risk in working on a fragmented project team?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I live here in Nashville, Tennessee. By the way, that's the home of the AFC South currently leading Tennessee Titans. I know everybody's thinking about that here today, but we are part. Little John is part of project teams. It's funny. I don't have a single project in Nashville. I don't have a single project in the state of Tennessee. All of my work and my team's work are out of state, and so this fragmented, or what I call virtual project team, certainly opens up firms to potential risk, and a lot of it boils down to communication and data management. When your virtual team is scattered around the country, it makes communication much more difficult. You need to consciously make an effort to keep the communication going almost constantly. The consolidation of project documents is very difficult when you're scattered around the country. There's a greater potential for utilizing the wrong data or outdated data, and it's so all of this probably falls under data management. And what I'd like to do, Tyler, is highlight one of the projects that we recently worked on, and it's up on your screen now. This was a VA outpatient clinic in Kernersville, North Carolina. It's about a 350,000 square foot outpatient clinic. So it's not your CVS walk-in clinic. This was a big facility, about about 2,000 parking spaces in a big building. North of a $100 million project, but so the project is the red star you can see, project location, Kernersville, North Carolina, just outside of Winston-Salem. I was responsible for the site, civil, and the landscape. The architect, and I'm in Nashville. The architect is in Charlotte, North Carolina. The general contractors in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. The geotechnical engineer was in Raleigh. Structural engineer was in Greensboro, North Carolina. The owner is the VA out of D.C. and the MEP consultant was out of Philadelphia. So this is the design and construction team. This was a 3P project, public-private partnership. So it was design, build, own, lease back to the VA. Fantastic project, but with a virtual team scattered as much as we were, you can see that communication and data management was absolutely critical, and any misstep along the way could have been catastrophic. It certainly didn't go 100% smoothly. We had hiccups, but it was a great team, and we delivered a great product that is now open. But even sometimes your different team members can be contracted with someone different. The structural and the MEP was contracted through the architect. The civil and landscape architect, we were contracted through the developer. And the geotechnical and survey that were contracted directly to the owner. So it's not just that your team could be scattered about, but they could be contractually and legally responsible to different entities. So once again, communication and the data management was critical. If someone was left out of the communication loop or is working off of outdated information, it just could have halted the project. Of course, each team member was working somewhat independently, since we're not all in the same building or even in the same town, and working towards different submittal deadlines. And as I like to say, everyone was slinging ink, and we were heading towards those deadlines, and we're passing back and forth just huge files. Most of the audience probably knows Revit files, and in our case, Civil 3D files are very large files, and it's not practical to email those files anymore. We did have an FTP site, but after we purchased and started using Newforma, the FTP site became obsolete because we were able to transfer large files through Newforma, very easy, very secure, and a record is kept anytime you send a file, and anytime someone downloads that file. There's a record that is made and stored in the file, so the documentation is there. You're notified each time that team member downloads your file, and if we notice that someone hasn't downloaded the file, we gave them a call and say, hey, so we'll make sure you're working off the right file. But this, from a site civil standpoint, we just had so many different submittals. We were going through the town of Kernersville planning and engineering process. We had submittals to the North Carolina Department of Transportation because we were improving a state roadway. We had the typical submittals to the VA at the 35, 75, 100% level. We had submittals to North Carolina Department of Environment, Natural Resources. There's wetlands, and we had stormwater permitting. Winston-Salem, we had submittals for water and sewer to them. So we had all these different submittals going on at the same time. We were holding meetings with all the regulatory agencies. So we were generating meeting minutes. We had permit submittals. We were getting comments back from the town and from all the regulatory agencies. We had responses to them. We had thousands of photographs, and we had literally thousands of emails that were generated on this project, and so we had to manage all of that data. And regarding the submittals, we had parallel submittals, like for instance to the town. Our 100% stamp submittal was only a 75% submittal to the VA, and by the time we got to revision 4 with the town, we finally submitted 100% submittal to the VA. So we were going through submittals and comment responses at different intervals with the different regulatory agencies, and the potential to get the drawings mixed up and send the wrong entity, the wrong version of this drawing was a high possibility. With Newforma, it's fantastic. It will keep up with the different revisions and tell you what the current revision is. And as you file all these drawings in Newforma, it will keep up with all the different submittals. So if someone were to get into the what's called the Newforma Project Center, it's very easy to see which drawing base is current, and if they pulled the wrong base, it sends a little warning saying this drawing is not the most current version. Would you like to use the most current version? So it's very great in that aspect. Everyone had to actively participate in all the comment responses, so we were always getting input throughout the process. In my mind, probably one of the best and most powerful tools of Newforma is the search tool. I guess I can get into the email management as well, but the search tool, it probably saved our hiney several times. Maybe you vaguely remember something that the fire marshal told you 6 months ago, but you can't remember if it was by email or a letter or a phone call or a face-to-face meeting. With Newforma, you can do a search for maybe the fire marshal's name, or maybe a topic. Maybe it's fire department connection. You can input that, and it can search all of your emails. It'll search your letters, your meeting minutes. It will even search your photographs if you've named your photographs, and we'll do it across your email folder, your anything on that drive or within that network. You put on there, I want you to search throughout my emails, or this drive, or this folder, or this series of drives, and it will just do it and show you anything that comes back that says fire department connection. It's fantastic. Even if you've misfiled the document in another project file, Newforma will find it, because you can keep expanding your search to other files or drives. Back in the, I guess I was going to say old days, but it's not too long ago. We don't have hard files anymore here at our office, but not too long ago we did. And if you misfiled a letter, it was gone. It was lost forever. Or you had Tyler Ferguson looking in banker boxes for a week trying to find that letter that someone thinks they remember. But now, within minutes, it can find that letter if you have misfiled it. So from a risk management perspective, certainly having access to all the project data electronically can save you weeks of research and several thousands of dollars, literally. From a collaborative standpoint, if everybody on your team has Newforma, everybody can have access, and then you can set access requirements. You know, the MEP can have access to certain folders, if you will, so you can set all of that. And so if everyone has Newforma, everybody can get into it. It's not absolutely necessary that everyone on your team has Newforma. You know, one company can have it and be the gatekeeper, if you will, and that one company can still send out all the files, can do the file transfer and keep up with all of the documentation. But if all the companies do, or a majority of them do, it makes the collaborative effort so much easier, so much smoother. We had several of us on this particular project that did have Newforma, and it certainly made life easy for us. Let me talk about the email for just a minute. On this project, we had, like I said, we had thousands of emails, and it still takes a little discipline to file your emails away. It's very easy. We have Microsoft Outlook, just as probably most people on this call do, and it's simply a drag and click into a folder. But there is some discipline, and there are some people who certainly, even with all the technology at their fingertips, just simply won't utilize it. There's a picture up there now of someone at my office, I'm afraid, who has not come into the 21st century, and that you can see his filing system right there. But with the emails, you can search, you can attach emails to different RFIs, or to contractor submittals, or to RFI responses, and it just makes the retrieval of all that information so much easier. I feel like I've been rambling, Tyler. Do you have, hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you sharing your experience with us. And if you could do me a favor and tell this gentleman that my Buckeyes will be looking for a little bit of revenge in Columbus next year in October.
When I took this picture, I made sure I had that Penn State poster in the background.
So when we're talking about, I'm going to go back to your slide here of the the project team being scattered all over. When I look at this, and when I hear you talking about, the enormous amounts of data that are being generated, and there's different reporting structures. Some people are contractually obligated to the owner. Some are contractually obligated to party B or C. No one outside the architect and the general contractor are in the same city to where they can really, realistically have, face-to-face meetings on a regular basis. So we're depending entirely on building a process. And, we've talked to folks, at the round tables. This came up quite a bit. Everybody's using different systems and everybody's got different processes. And to your point, software is not the answer to every question. Process is very important. We're trained engineers. We're trained problem solvers. But ultimately, you give 10 sprinters the same pair of running shoes, and someone's still going to win the race and somebody's going to lose it. The tools aren't everything. We have to have process around it. But it sounds like in this particular project, with all this information going on back and forth, ultimately the thing that's most important to everyone is providing the client with a quality product and getting them their lights turned on and their building operational as quickly and easily as possible and on budget. And with all this data and all this coordination, and like you said, the possibility for people to be looking at out-of-date documents and out-of-date drawings. There's a lot of potential for issues. And ultimately, we all want the project to be successful because it's our reputations at stake. But ultimately, mistakes happen. And if I'm understanding you correctly, your ability to be able to find information regardless of where it was filed, whether that's on a drive, a project-wise server, email server, wherever this data is, whatever particular silo it's in, verifying the correct versions are being sent out, and transferring files with a project context, so it's accessible and you know who received it, when they received it, and that's all tied back into your kind of main focal point of the data. Am I understanding correctly that not only helped the project run smoother, but made you feel a little more confident should something happen that did create a delay, and all these parties are standing around talking about who's going to pay for, whatever the issue is on the job site? You feel like you're ready to go into that room and make sure that you can defend yourself?
Absolutely, that's a good question, and one particular instance that happened is the MEP on this project was working off of some outdated, base plan that we had provided, and I won't tell you who they are, obviously, but they started complaining that the lowly site civil had given them the wrong information. And then I said, oh, not really. I said, on October 4th, John Smith downloaded the correct file that we sent. He downloaded that at 2:54 p.m. So you've had that information since October 4th, and so that was obviously the end of that argument. But another feature of New Forma that's pretty cool, and I had touched on it. It will keep track of the different versions, but it will also graphically show you the difference in the versions. So we could pull up architectural floor plan or base plan, if you will, and if we got a new floor plan from the architect, we could pull up the two, and New Forma will highlight the difference graphically between those two plans. I don't know how it does it. I think it's some black magic, but it's really cool. So you can very quickly see what the change was and if it will affect anything that we would have to do from a site or civil standpoint. And the other thing is probably the emails. I keep touching on this. I mean, we had thousands and thousands of emails on this. As everybody knows, emails have pretty much taken the place of written letters, and they are certainly discoverable in a litigation process. Emails, they're a good way to document verbal conversations. There's still lots and lots of verbal conversations that take place, not by my kids. They're all text and emails, but or Snapchat probably. But as this documentation of verbal conversations, they're critical files that need to be documented, and those files must be retrievable. Once again, without New Forma, an email that's misfiled is lost forever, and it's not going to help you during a litigation. You may think, well, I'm sure I got an email from the owner that said, to do it this way. Without that email, you have no argument in case the project goes to litigation. So
I couldn't agree with you more. We hear an awful lot that so much of design intent and decisions are made nowadays via email. And, the old way, you have it sitting on a laptop and someone leaves the company. That laptop gets thrown into an IT closet, and when it comes time to find the information, nobody knows where those emails are. And what you said about having the right versions of the documents, I can more relate to that. again, when I was low man on the totem pole, I got sent out to a job site to go investigate some issues up on a roof in February in Columbus. And I don't know if you've ever been to Columbus, Ohio in February, but it is cold. And I walked around on the roof for an hour and a half looking for something that was never installed. It was on an old set of drawings. So I was walking in circles the whole time. So having the right documents is absolutely critical, and not having a way to keep track of that. We've certainly heard a lot of people say that impacts their business. Guys, I want to thank you for sharing some of these stories with us. I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, are we ready to open up and get some questions from the attendees?
Yeah, let's do that. We've got a couple good questions here. Let me look. So let's start with this one. And this would be for both Tom and Jason. Let's go with Tom first. What poses the greatest risk to your firm's profitability?
The greatest risk to our firm's profitability is through litigation, certainly, and so the easiest way to manage that risk is through everything we've talked about today: the data management and the discipline to, for instance, file your emails to the project. That is our greatest risk is the design error. I hate to even say that, but errors and omissions. It happens very, very rarely, but the claims don't happen as rarely. So we're always having to defend ourselves, and without good disciplined data management, we're exposing ourselves and exposing all the profit that we work so hard to earn.
Jason, do you have anything to add to that?
I think, in simplest terms, less revenue or more expenses. And so in terms of managing data, clearly the inability to be responsive to clients or manage the work that we're doing on their behalf effectively and efficiently, such that it causes a decline in relationship, and obviously that affects our ability to earn additional revenue in the future. And then certainly when we're inefficient, when we have to spend hours or days trying to find information that we had previously misfiled, as some of the points Tom made earlier, that leads to greater inefficiency and therefore less effective use of our labor, and so now our expenses are increasing. So either one of those two things tend to travel right to the bottom line.
Well, here's another good question, and I'm start with Jason on this. You talked about some older projects, and how do you blend the hard copy and the digital submittals, particularly when you're getting involved in a new digital system, just the startup of the whole transition process?
Yeah, so we obviously work with contractors that are in the submittal process that still subscribe to the traditional sending of hard copies, but in our case, in our workflow, what we're doing is basically taking those hard copies, scanning them into our system, and then tracking them as if they had been submitted electronically. So we still work it into the process to convert a traditional hard copy of a submittal or deliverable, whatever the case may be, in a digital fashion. So we, like Tom had also shared, we have basically eliminated all our traditional hard file and hard filing systems. Saved us a lot of square footage as well.
Tom, you want to add anything to this?
Well, I guess the only thing I would add, Bob, is contractually when one of our projects go out to bid, that hard copy, if you will, is still what the contractor is contractually obligated to construct, and the digital submittals are for their convenience, if you will. But contractually, it is still the hard copies. I think that is changing nationwide. You're seeing more and more purely digital submittals that go out to bid, and then so the contractor has that full model, if you will, to construct from. But just as Jason said, our initial step was taking all those hard copies and scanning them, so they're only images. But then as we produce CAD files or models, whether it's Revit or Civil 3D or some other model, our deliverable is still that PDF or that hard copy. So we haven't come entirely into the digital age yet, I think, as a design and construction industry.
Well, Tom, you showed a photo of someone's office with piles of paper. So this question probably start with you. How did you address any resistance to a new system for managing information, or how do you still address any resistance?
We still do. That's a great question. We are engineers and landscape architects and planners. We are technical people, and we hate change. A lot of us don't respond well to change, but when you sit down with these people and say, hey, this is your livelihood. If you're not able to change, you're going to be left behind. You're exposing the company's profits to risk, certainly. And so when you explain that it's going to help your bottom line, or if they don't change, it could potentially hurt your bottom line, that makes a difference. Now, of course, this guy from Penn State, he's never going to change, just as most people from Penn State won't. But I think for the most part we're coming around. I'm not perfect either. I still forget to click and drag emails into a RFI folder or into a project folder, and then once a week I force myself to go back and clean up my inbox. The email inbox is not meant to be your to-do list. It needs to be filed as quickly as it can into the various project folders.
Well, Jason, same question for you. How do you address any resistance to new
systems? It's certainly a big challenge. There's no doubt. Every new IT system that I've ever been involved in, it's always the change management comes with it. One thing we've experienced in those late adopters of the new form of system that we're using is that as they find their way into it and as they start using it to do the transactions they need to do to carry out the project, success feeds success. They really find, well, man, this is a lot easier than managing an inbox that is just full of emails that need to go somewhere. Or when you go and they've got their desk better organized and there's not all those hanging issues out there. They feel better, they feel more productive, and it kind of spawns further use and kind of growth of how we apply it to the projects that we're managing. So that's one thing I think we do. The other thing is we're investing in training. When we first got the system, we did the training that came with it, which was, I think, a 3 or 4 day kind of, drink from a fire hose. And it probably went in one ear and out the other. We have since been kind of reinitiating that. We've got new people that needed exposure. And so we're doing it in smaller chunks, 1 to 1.5 hour web meetings that hit certain topics. And that seems to be a little more effective in terms of getting some of their more casual users to adopt some of the good practices. So that's some things we're doing.
Bob, if you don't mind,
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'd like to jump in and give some input on this question, because I've seen it from both sides. I've been on the side where I'm evaluating software, and I've been on the software company side. And I think there's two parts that are very important for implementation. One is that making sure you have the right tool. Evaluating software is something that I think software companies and engineering companies don't really do the right way a lot of times. It's important, if you're evaluating software, to clearly outline the issues that are impacting your business. What are the causes of your heartburn, and what's the impact of that? And then communicate that to your software company. And if your software company salespeople are worth their weight in salt, they're going to want to know what are the issues, and they're going to want to help you figure out if their software solves those issues, and they're going to want to help you figure out what's the cost of doing business now, and is there going to be a benefit there? Because ultimately, companies like Newforma, we are successful when you're successful. We want long-term business relationships. Once you establish that the software is the appropriate tool, as Jason said, a measured, intelligent implementation, not overdoing it with training, establishing internal champions, get your staff involved, give them some ownership. People want to contribute, and they want to see things be successful, and giving them some ownership and explaining to them why you're doing things, not just saying, we're implementing this because I said so. We're implementing this because this is impacting our bottom line, and we're at risk here, and these processes are inefficient, and these are the goals we're trying to achieve. Can you help us?
Great. Well, let's take one more question. And Tyler, I think I'll just give this to you, since you're probably in the best position to answer. And there are a couple questions about limiting access to certain files. What do you do with confidential information? You don't want to give too much access to too many people.
Sure, and Newforma works over top of your existing infrastructure. So we want to make sure the appropriate information is visible to those who need it, but it's certainly not opening up the entire company to being able to read the CEO's private email. It's not going to create an environment where everything is visible. It's going to give you an environment where the things you want people to see and the things you need to share are available for those who need it. And you have all the control internally as a company as to who sees what and who has permissions to view what information.
Okay. Well, as we finish up, you can download your certificate of completion from the event resources section on the left side of the screen. And after downloading the certificate, enter your name in it and print and save a copy of the PDF. The certificate will be available through the end of today only. A hard copy will not be mailed or emailed to you. If you missed our note at the beginning and you are watching the live webcast with a group on one person's computer, please download the multiple viewer registration form and complete and submit the form to receive credit. We need this information in case you're audited and we are contacted to verify this continuing education activity. Additionally, this webcast is being recorded, or has been recorded, and will be archived on csengineermag.com/continuing education. For viewers of archived webcasts, click on the quiz button at the bottom of your screen to take a quiz on the presentation. Archive viewers must pass a quiz in order to download a certificate of completion. The answers to all of the questions submitted today will be available online within a few days at csengineermag.com/continuing education. So please check there for further discussion about today's topic. As we conclude, you should see a webcast evaluation survey. We appreciate your feedback, which helps Zweig Group and sponsors such as Newforma plan future webcasts. So thank you to Tyler Ferguson, Tom Davis, and Jason Brooks, and to everyone who joined us. This ends today's webcast.